Good day, everyone. I'm Alvin Cabalquinto, an instructor at the Department of History at the Ateneo de Manila University, serving as the host or MC for today's event. Here are some reminders before we start. First, we are currently here at the Faber Hall here in the Ateneo de Manila University. For our on-site participants, please observe proper health protocols. Keep your phones in silent mode. We'd like to also give an announcement that the book will be available for sale today at 15% off. And after the book launch, the book lecture, and the open forum, there will be a book signing. We also have guests in our Zoom room, and we are streaming live on the Ateneo de Manila University Press Facebook page. For our online participants, if you have any questions, comments during the talk itself, you can kindly use the comment section. Welcome everyone to today's event, this book launch and the lecture of The Rulers of Magindanao in Modern History 1515 to 1903, Continuity and Change in a Traditional Realm in Southern Philippines, is brought to you by the Ateneo de Manila University School of Social Sciences, the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, the Department of History, the Anthropological and Sociological initiatives of the Ateneo or Asia, in collaboration with the Ateneo de Manila University Press. So to start off our event, may we call on Dr. Jose Joel Canuday, the chair of the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, for his opening remarks.
Thank you. On behalf of the Sociology and Anthropology Department and the History Department of the Ateneo de Manila, I stand before you with privilege and honor to host the public lecture and launching of the most recent book authored by Dato Michael Mastura, The Rulers of Magindanao in Modern History 1515 to 1903. I have been trained as an anthropologist, primarily drawing insights and materials from Mindanao and the broader Bangsamoro experience. As a scholar of the region, going through the expansive written works of A. Michael Ong Mastura is inescapable. As a scholar, engaging his work is not always straightforward because of the many layers and the expanse of insights that often dispel assumption of the region and the Muslim experience. But once get access to the complex documentations, thoughts, and propositions in his works, it offers more than understanding, but also provocation that compels scholars and fellow readers to further engage. I have been an avid reader of his Muslim Filipino Experience, a collection of essays published by the Ministry of Muslim Affairs in 1984. That have been my proverbial Bible, so to speak, my go-to in my own scholarly work on Islamic cosmopolitanism and dialogue studies. Often, when I write my own work, I would often find myself asking, what would Dato Mike say? When I would have to deal with the question of Islamic traditions and the Muslim experience, not only in the Philippine context, but also about its place in Southeast Asia. The current book, The Rulers of Magindanao, that we will be raising our glass to after, and I am pretty sure the lecture that we'll be hearing from him this afternoon offers greater insights to behold not only about the rulers of Magindanao, but of the greater human condition of that part in the world, in Mindanao. I am not giving a review of the book, whom uh, whom will be given by another distinguished scholar and practitioner of Mindanao, Dr. Stephen Rood, whom I am giving my shout out now as a way of thanking him for accepting our our request to review it this afternoon. Uh, Reading through the rulers of Maguindanao, however, I cannot help but marvel of the attention to details and expansive coverage drawing from the knowledge tools of historiography, anthropology, politics, and sociology that Michael Mastura had done. I can see this book as an invaluable legacy, one for the Magindanao society at one level, but more broadly to the Bangsamoro and the Philippine national community. It is also a scholarly legacy that many of us scholars will have to pore over, probably to also disagree with, as I do and I did on some parts when I reviewed the book for him, but also to cite, quote, and work on towards the expansion of our collective understanding of the region and our shared condition. This is a book for our time and the ages that will come. And this afternoon is an exemplary occasion wherein we sit to hear from Dato Michael Mastura himself, his insights on the book and the rulers of Maguindanao. I once again thank Dato Mike for the privilege of hosting the public lecture and the book launch as I welcome everyone today in this room to this event and to the Ateneo de Manila. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Kanuday. Now, to start our public lecture, I have now the privilege to introduce our speaker, Datu Mastura. Datu Michael Ong Mastura is a direct descendant of Sultan Muhammad Dipatuan Kudarat of the Maguindanao Sultanate. Educated and trained as a lawyer, he was responsible for the codification project of the Muslim personal laws that established the Sharia court in the country and was invited as amicus curiae at the Supreme Court. He is founder and president of the Sultan Muhammad Dipatuan Kudarat Islamic Academy Foundation College. Everyone, let us give a warm round of applause to Datu Michael Ong Mastura.
Good afternoon. Assalamu alaikum. I'm a very good pupil. I can remove it. Now I am very nervous because I thought some people here will not be around. I see faces whom I have not seen for ages. And I want to thank you for coming. So, Karina, I thank you for bringing all the new friends, acquaintance. Joel, for hosting this. I'm saying my thank you ahead because I might forget. I saw when I requested Father Joel, Joey Cruz, my boss in one of the scholarship grants of Madre España to scholars. I served for 3 years with the late Father June Mercado and Ed De Jesus, and I don't remember the others now. So, Father, I thank you for coming. He must have gone already because he's busy. Okay. Normally, I would say, if the audience were all Muslim, salam, dua. When we say salam, it's peace. And dua means prayer. That you will achieve peace. We were getting worried for friends to come on campus because of the late incident that happened here on graduation day, Joy. I apologize for such an incident. That's why I pinpointed one detail in this presentation. regicide. Many people don't know what regicide is. What the hell is that? Pardon my language. Okay, anyway, uh, two things. I wanted a paper, very short paper, and it's available. The other is, maybe I should have a reader's guide to the rulers because it's a thick book. And as Joel said, it has layers and layers of concepts. Never mind the narratives, you can read that leisurely. But I am after the scholarship. I have come to Ateneo. 3 of my children came here. 2 became lawyers. Only one went to LaSalle University. And my good yes, and my good friends in the University of the Philippines, where I used to teach at the Islamic Institute, uh, regrettably said, "Why didn't you send your children to the University of the Philippines?" So, to start with, so that we don't waste time, can you flash the next? No. Begin where it is. Genealogy as construct in historiography. The theme that I will present would be that genealogy normally speaks of chain of transmission of descent line. Who are the descendants? But it can serve as a construct in historiography. We are not talking just history, but the writing of history. So, the first thing to be aware of is language awareness. Because the genealogist and describes who wrote the 𝙍𝙪𝙚𝙦. Again, 𝙍𝙪𝙚 is genealogy. Literally, it means genealogy. If it were the genealogy of women, then it will be tirumba. But I don't want to put in many concepts. Otherwise, you get confused. Let's stick to 𝙍𝙪𝙚𝙦, the male line. Agnates, agnatic line. And remember that they were accompanied by khutbah, what you would call in the Catholic sense, homily on Fridays. And these are written, they used to be written, where the names of the sultans are mentioned. In the time of the caliphate, they would mention from generation to generation up to the last reigning sultan. Now, they wrote also in Kirim or Jawi. The late Francisco Tan and I also were involved in the translation of the Jawi scripts. This Java, from Java, therefore Jawi script. Kirim, the local name in Magindanao. That means that it is written in the Arabic alphabet, but the language is the local dialect. In other words, if it is Tausug, Tausug, but written in Arabic in Tausug. If it is Magindanao, then it is written in Arabic, again alphabet, but Magindanao dialect. So with Maranao and so on. Now, the Jawi, the Malay world, also did the same. There is a mistake about writing these terms in the Spanish spelling. And the most pronounced is the word Maguindanao itself, which is written now by the Republic of the Philippines in statute books as M-A-G-U-I, Gui. But in Spanish, you and I know, there are speakers of Spanish here, that G-U-I is Ge, guerra, arguillas, things like that. So, but in Magindanao, it would directly be GI, Magindanao. Now, another one is out. My editor for the publication and I had many little quarrels about spelling, because I insisted on the local spelling, then it would again be changed, including algorithm which changes the spelling. That's a problem, Joel, really. And we have to make some errata, in fact. Okay. So it will be a W would be a ow. So I want you to remember that Najib Salibi, who translated the Tarsilas of Maguindanao and Sulu, used a transliteration system in Romanic, meaning the alphabet that we have now, the English alphabet that we are using, and the readers will be able to apply such transliteration using phonic sound, so like Maguindanao. Now, why we stress Maguindanao? Because the title of the book is Rulers of Maguindanao in Modern History. This genealogy or Tarsila is what is now known as the Mastura superscripts, MSS, translated in 1903 from ethnographic facts for usage to reconstruct the past. So I want you to know that that is history. In terms of presenting that fact, the problem with our history of Muslim South, or Southeast Asia for that matter, is the question of who the personality is. So that is why Kudarat is one of those personalities. Elito, I give an example, Datu of Rajaboyan, because so you have to look for a personality to attach to a certain historical narrative. Elito also used biographical approach for the manuscript. So you see nothing but names after names, and you will never be able to find a way to approach it if you did not have a tutor. If I must admit, with due respect to you, Ma'am Ting Ting Kohanko, I tutored her on when she wrote the book that you also launch here, according to Father Joy, the Bangingi history, Basilan, because that's the way to do it. The other thing is geography. So now what we have here is an idea of why I use genealogy for historiographical writing. I think we can move to the next slide. So the first chapter in the book, you will see all about this genealogy and how we put it into the narratives. Now, I want to tell you that Maguindanao, not this Maguindanao now as a province divided into north, which is norte, and sur, south, but the Maguindanao that we are talking of, the Sultanate of Maguindanao, which embraces the whole of Mindanao, minus a little point there where Misamis or Butuan coastal areas, because there were already Christian migrants there. This is what I would describe Maguindanao Sultanate is about. It is a product of geography and culture rather than of politics and economics. This is what Joel probably is referring to, layers after layer. So I layered it with this idea. Events occurred long periods of time. Therefore, you cannot approach this historiography and the conjunctures at crossing points. You have conjunctures where there is change. That's why transition, meaning continuity and change. In the course of time, therefore, I use epochal duration. In French, I don't know if it's correct pronunciation, longévité. It's a long duration. So, well, some here of you are historians. Who is the person we attribute this to? Yes, Rodin. Rodin. So, you have an idea, a movement of people and ideas. And therefore, it's not a short-term historical narrative like the syndrome, 1896 revolution. See, one era, done. No, it has to be epochal, but of long duration. So naturally, because it was of natural longevity, so there is also changing between people, the orayat, the subjects. Now, we cannot speak of subjects. When I wrote this, I was imagining that the Filipino nationalist historian would not understand me, because they would say it's unthinkable that we would have subject people here. They are not slaves, but we are talking of royal lineage. An Englishman, a Scotchman, a Espanol, a Frenchman, not of the Republic, would understand what a subject is. Subject of the crown, subject of His Royal Highness. Unthinkable under the Republican system. Therefore, we have to look at the maritime culture of the time and relate this long-term narrative to what is called in history periodization. Now, I insert a Muslim theory of history. A Muslim theory of history, not necessarily Moro, but of Islamic history. A Muslim theory of history made real in time. It is made real in time at historical moments of its use as the direction in the process of change itself. That's a mouthful. I leave it to you to understand it, to misunderstand it, or not to understand it at all. But the idea is to apply first. What do you do with Mahul's Muslims of the Philippines? Mahul must have been imagining something that was not there. No, he was looking at what is called constellation of sultanates in the maritime Asia. So that is why nationalist historians cannot see beyond what I am talking about, what Mahul has described as constellation, because they are no longer thinking in terms of the maritime glory of this area where the old Filipinos, not Filipinos yet as a nation, multi-Filipinos in quotation. And so we jumped for a long time, much longer, the overlordships in harbor principalities or port polities, and the princely life of Malay notables. So you go to whom? To W. Walters, an expert on Southeast Asia. Those who go to Southeast Asian Princeton University or uh, uh, where Southeast Asian studies is their forte, would know what I'm talking about. In the Sri Vijaya days or ages, eras, they talk of the overlords. There were no large cities. There were port towns and port cities. But they were like the city, Greek city-states were states in themselves, not the idea of the Philippine state now or the United States of America, but as polities. So the question comes, when the reign of the rulers and succession is problematized, PhD students, you are asked to problematize your subject. So the question generated is sociological, not a historical. I don't know if the sociologist or anthropologist will agree with me. Agreed. Okay. All right. So you see, so in other words, again, you see, because I'm talking historiography and not history itself. I wish that there are history students here and not just, so move to the next slide. Am I going very slow? No, okay, it's fine. Rather than reading the book, no? Okay, why start with 1500? Because that's the modern age, really. It starts there. When, because history, to be accepted in our time, would have to be dated, will have to be documented. Now, 1500 onward to the 16, 17, 18. Wag munang 19. Okay, what is the narrative about the movement of people? This is documented in Southeast Asia, not in the Philippines. We look at Blair and Robertson and Morga and all of those written about Mindanao and Sulu. Now, in the Malay world, we have what we call Sejarah Melayu. These are narratives of the Malay world, and which included the Muslim South now. Okay, so this volume that we have now does not cover that period. That's why when one of my peer reviewers asked, why didn't you cite my old friend who died also in 2010, I think, Azra 𝙍𝙪𝙚𝙬𝙣, an expert on Sufi and the origins of Malay nationalism. I did cite him because at the time I wrote this book, he was still a PhD student, or maybe a master's degree student. No, his book was published only in 2020 or something. We have to check that. All right. So or 2004, rather. Now, so where do we go from there if we exclude it as a period to draw uh, materials from? We can refer, but we go to the period of Sufi navigation, the Sayyids and the mosaics. Again, Joel, I did not write about, I left this part. In the first launching of this book, Karen, I'm calling you first name basis, right? Or director. I was asked by the media who are thinking fiction writers and history as fiction. So, what is the spoiler in your book? So my mind got confused. Is he asking about fiction? Or is he asking about the peace process? Because there are spoilers of the peace process. But you and I know that in literature, when you are asked about the spoiler, ayun pala, what is it that you have not written and included here, but the reader can anticipate? And to me, I said, first, my reference to the cartas jesuitas. And, of course, Sufi movement in Southeast Asia. And you can see that in the book, I mentioned Sufi, but I never discussed Sufi because I feel that that is a theme that should be elaborated. And I might do it by annex, or I thought one chapter would be very long, or another book. So never mind, in the meantime, to balance the cartas. Cartas jesuitas are the letters of the Jesuits from Mindanao. Carol, you used to write letters from Mindanao by Carol Argillas in the one of the newspapers. Anyway, we go to define this Sufi navigation. In the early days, it's rather difficult in the Philippines, but in Malaysia and Indonesia, it's easy to do that. So I choose the word or theory of peregrination. That applies to birds, no? But in the olden days, the prince of the Srivijaya and the Majapahit and the old overlordships, they were very fond of sojourning. And in the Malay world, this is called merantau. Merantau means journeying, but the idea is that you journey on, but you return. Recently, there is something written about Magellan circumnavigating the world, but he has not returned to his native Portugal. My wife's ancestors are Portuguese, they are not Spaniards. I found that out. So the Portuguese are really navigators. No? Now, so I connect that to Asabia. The kinship system, the rise and fall of the dynastic regime or reigns, and sedentary life. You will recall, if you are a reader of, who is he? Nobody knows? This theory? Prolegomena. Mukaddima di Ibn Khaldun. You see, you are not aware of these authors because you do not use them in your framework. But I hope and I wish that you next generation will draw upon this, not necessarily from the Western world authorities, no? Because the Western world cites this cycle. Huh? You see? So now, Mahul. Problema ni Mahul. How do you go about the stages of the war, the more wars against Spain? So it is his PhD dissertation. He had to go back and problematize the chronology of the rulers of Magindanao and the rulers of Sulu, because it was essential to his construction. And that is why his first problem is the chronology of the sultanates. You check again the book of Mahul on Muslims in the Philippines. It is so easy now. And then he could side by side now trace the Moro Wars. I hope you understand me. So that goes to the coming of Islam, founding of Sulu, and the Magindanao Sultanate. That's already written by Salibi, and of course Mahul. And then he asked me to write this book because he wanted some sociological and anthropological approach. He was not so keen about anthropology, that anthropology is overtly used in reconstruction of history here in the Philippines. Positive anthropology at that. There is a debate between culturalist anthropologists and positivist. Joy, right? Huh? Sagutin ni Stephen Rudian, ha? Okay, so let's move. Very quickly, again, this is just a sketch because you'll have to read the book, but I am moving your mind now to the pre-colonial state system under Adat political structure. Adat means customary political structure. In Indonesia and in Malaysia, they have Adat structures and they have constitutional structures. Here, I'm so glad that Mahul and I work on the Muslim personal law or Code of the Philippines, because that's an idea of a constituted authority in Islam where the judge bases his decision when a case is brought to him. That is sovereignty. But that is not contradicting the sovereignty of the Republic of the Philippines, but that is called legal pluralism. Again, we lawyers will argue, the Supreme Court and I will argue about legal pluralism. For quite some time, they were not accepting the concept of legal pluralism because we are civilist country, but not knowing that the Napoleonic Code was borrowed by Spain and then introduced into the Philippines, and in turn, they borrowed from the Arabs, the Muslim personal law of the Arabs, also Islam, in other words. So, Combis is our authority for the 16th century. You have the triumvirate of Raja Sirungan, Raja Sarikula, and Datu Buisan, the father of the redoubtable Sultan Kudarat. Pertuan in Malaysia, but Dipatuan in Magindanao. Then the next is the age of Kudarat himself. The Sultanate began with Kudarat. You can have excerpts, the principles that now brings us to the kinship system. So this is very technical. because I am not an anthropologist, I'm not a sociologist, but I had very good friends who lived with me, and I learned a lot from them. One of them is Dr. Jeremy Beckett. Uh, I learned today, salamat po, that he died 2 years ago. 2 years ago, the wife was looking for me, and anyway, you see, Karina, you have again put genealogy there of scholars. Because there is such a thing as genealogy of ideas. That is Foucault. You want me to go to postmodernist now? Postmodernism? Anyway, just to have an idea so that the ladies here, Pichi, don't think that Muslims do not respect women, huh? The title Raja Putri was first used in Sulu when a Magindanao Raja, Gugo is as good as Raja, but used in the Ternate area, in the Sangir area. So, and then Kudarat marrying Raja Mampai. Okay. Statecraft principle of unilateral descent. How come a lady can be sultana of the Tausugs when in Islam it is not permitted? Of course, in the Republic now, like Pakistan, we have a prime minister who is a lady. So, and in Bangladesh, the British had Margaret for the first time. America has never had one president. They cannot succeed. You see? Okay. So Siti Kabira means grand mistress. Becoming a sultan because there was no heir. Now, jump centuries after, you have a Raja Putri in the last reigning monarch of Magindanao. That is why Sultan Magiging is the last sultan, but he was a weak man. But rather than violate hypergamy, what is hypergamy? A woman who high rank cannot marry a man of lower rank. She has to marry somebody equal, if not above him. Hypergamy in the royal descent line. Okay, or the lineage line. So that is why there is a principle of core lineage. So we belong to the core lineage of Kudarat. I cannot give up that because it is reckoned on the male line, agnetic line, not on the female line. Again, we will have to review who is the sociologist, anthropologist here other than Joel here. We are not very good at this. We are very good at compadre, comadre, which the Spaniards introduced to us. Now, that is why, Joel, I had a problem, Ma'am Karina, with my editor. I don't know where. I have not yet met Julian, my editor. I had some quarrel at times with him. Because when I wrote this, Karina, I was using sources of the Royal Journal, the British Royal Journal and Malaysian Royal Journal, and they were mostly written in passive sentences. And I had to write, if I caught or reintroduced this, I had to write also in the passive. Then when Julian tried, good for my original editor, Carol Arguelles, she understands me. So I had a hard time rewriting a passive sentence or paragraph into positive, active sentence. I've been asking my son to go over. We only found one running sentence. I don't know, page something. Anyway, trabaho natin yan sa sa errata. Okay. Okay, I will draw you to a little knowledge that I have. Very dangerous, huh? Little learning is dangerous. Meron kasi theory in corporate groups, clan. Normally, you reckon yung agnetic line through lineal or unilinear. L kung yung lineage. Now, problema mo, I'm using Tagalog, meron tinatawag na segmentary, meaning mag-segment, divided. Can you apply this principle to corporate groups? At the time I wrote, it was a no. But there was a rethinking in anthropology. There was a rethinking, if you remember. Knowing historiography of anthropology. And so, by now, I am justified. But in those days, I had a problem debating with Jeremy Beckett. And no, are they a corporate group or not? So they are corporate. It's now because, you see, that scholarship, it has changed. Well, it's very technical, I'm sorry, but I have to mention this because I am in the #1 anthropology, sociology department among the universities of the Philippines. Is that correct? We can settle that by voting. They will not allow. Does UP admit that? Okay. So I am happy about that you are confirming my findings, no? Even if I am not a sociologist, anthropologist. No? I'm testing also. If I submitted this for PhD, I would have had Comadre, 3 PhDs maybe already. You have 1 PhD, you can add my 2 other. Para hindi naman boring, no? So let's move. Huh? Hindi ko na-elaborate. Joel, pardon me, hindi ako masyado marunong mag-operate. And so, Professor Dr. Baibado from UST, I brought him here. He is the Asian Assistant Secretary on the Asian Conference for Religion and Peace, together with my wife. But he is an academic, and I saw to it that he comes here so that he can document this. Okay, you are familiar with the word ethnic or no? The Americans are very good in ethnography. So, ethnicity also. Now, I'll mention. There is a companion, nauna pa nga siya nag-publish. She had a Yashi. First name, Popoy? Zinzo Hidayashi. Do you know this name? He's a Japanese scholar. He wrote, and it was published by Ateneo. The title is Mindanao Ethno-History. And the Igorot, no? The Sangir, Magindanao, Sangir, and the Igorot. Okay, I will go to that. Again, Hayashi used my um, graphic organizer. If you want to understand my book, first look at the graphic organizer so that you will see those layers that I'm talking about in terms of genealogy and kinship system. Now there is a concentric circle. Mahul is talking of, well, congeal of people coming to the Sultanate of Kudarat. Congeal, conji, ano pa nga yan? Sutanghon, noodle, not lugaw. Conji. Because lugaw, ganunin mo lang. Pero ito, tali-tali. Huh? Okay, all right. So concentric circle. All right, where we organize. Yes, I have already told you about this, the common link. Then the ruling dynasty, the core lineage of warriors, and the royal council here, Bichara Arad, Atas, then the council of the sultan. But this also goes to the layer ranks. The Datu ranks, Sayyids and Mosaics, and then the Domato Apanagias. Again, even this word may come strange to you. So you had a superintendent of the polity in the 18th century. Who are they? The Hambaraja. You check the royal journals in Brunei, in Malaysia, in Indonesia, you will find this word Hambaraja. You will find this word also in Thomas Forrest. He is the one who first described the organic structure of the Magindanao Sultanate, which equaled, you know how we went so high in culture? How? Because it was suggested by Forrest to the East India Company that they will mint a coin. On one side will be Sultan 𝙍𝙬𝙙𝙬𝙬, and on another side would be the seal of the English Dutch East India Company, English East India Company. Country trade, Quezon. Country trade, Quezon. History. So these Ambaraja and Castilles are not the Iranons and the Lanons in James Warren's book. They came with Kabunsuan, Sarip Kabunsuan. And therefore, were we democratic? Yes. Asserters of people's right. Please check. You will find there, magtaka ka, nauna kami sa idea ng ombudsman. That's why when I was a delegate to the Constitutional Convention, Delegate Robles and I sponsored the ombudsman concept. And I said, I know this very well. It's in my history book. It's in my veins. You see? So, we are not savages. Okay. So, enough of this kasi masyadong detalya. You should learn about Tupo clan. Sa elite ng taga-Maynila, sa elite ng taga-Ilocos, meron din yan. Pero nakalimutan dahil unang-unang naman ginawa ni Philip II was to declare all the caciques as the first chieftains. Pero, Pichi, bakit ba ninyo pinupropose na anti-dynasty? Kasi si Foucault, problema ni Foucault. Who is Foucault? Young men, do you know who is Foucault? Huh? Raise your right hand. Sino? You cannot be a constructivist or deconstructivist historian, huh? If you do not know Foucault. Or, I'm forgetting names anyway. Move on, please. How many minutes already? Mataas na siguro. I will make a shortcut. I-compare lang ninyo natin ito, ha? Kasi problem of my reconstruction. The Manila government, meaning colonial Spain, always intervened in who the successors to the Sultanate would be. Huh? And that's why we had trouble. And, it even led to the assassination. Imagine a Sulu Sultan assassinating a Magindanao Sultan. Yeah, regicide. Huh? And then following that, there will dynastic war. If the British had 30 years war, we also had 30 years dynastic war between Anwar and Manamir. And it was settled by this man, Fakir Maulana Kamsa. That is my reserve. That is my, what is this? Preserved for the Sufi, because the Sufi line goes from there. No? Because the Sufis also had their own hagiography. Tama ba yung pronunciation ko? Hagiography, hindi historiography. Yung mga saintly devotions natin, yung kanilang mga descent line, lineages, yun, hagiography. Try to check it, okay? Now, here is Beckett, Warren, Iranon, slave raiding of Sulu. Sumikat sila, no? Kami naman, sumikat kami doon sa Dad's cultural system. Laharhoven has the narrative now. Okay? Warren has the narrative for the Sulu zone. Okay, Beckett for the contemporary analysis of they are all here in your journals, no? Okay, anong maidagdag lang natin dyan is of course, Hideyashi for the Sangir and the, okay, may I ask you to move on? Conjunctures, okay? Ano in between those rise and fall? Kami sa outlying islands doon, kaya yung Sangir, si Hideyashi is correct about Magindanao was the first zone, but eastern zone. And then we have the western zone. We are talking now economics, trade, no? First, Sulu was related to the can I ask for water? He was related to, Sulu is tributary trade of China. Magindanao, walang tributary trade with China. The Chinese, the Ming Dynasty. Kaya meron tinatawag na Ming Gap. Yung porcelain, walang nabenta, walang masyadong porcelain dito during the Ming Dynasty because there was a gap in the trade system. Pero Sulu, champion of smuggling, nakaka-trade pa rin sila sa hanggang ngayon, champion. Pinapaayos ni President Cory Aquino sa akin yung barter trade. Sabi ko, ma'am, mamatay ako kung ayusin ko yan. Remember that? Hindi lang ako marunong magpera eh. Sayang. Okay, now, Moro piracy. Bakit? Anong ginawa ng Magindanao at that time? Thank you, thank you. Anong ginawa ng Magindanao? They turned, I borrowed this phrase from Walter, rewarding purposes than economic history. And what would that be? Thank you, Commander. You're still serving. I should serve you. Anyway, so you see how cooperative this audience is. Are you already bored? I'll stop. I know it because my wife was there. My brother, I brought him here because, puro politiko. Sabi ko, mag-rest ka naman dyan sa yung barm na yan. Puro, walang high-level thinking. Very dehumanizing. So that he will remember that he belongs to this. I also brought the Bayalabi of Magindanao, the wives. Why? By the way, si Kumadre, mayor na yan. Ng Radyabu yan. Oh, okay. So, now, anyway. Yan na yan, Joel, yung Sufism. The Sufi movement. Yan na yan. That's why, very quiet. They were not, never mind, they lost in the trade, but they were also developing the, if I discuss with you, it would be very religious. Okay. Mahul and I agreed that our Islamic writing, we will not mix with this history. So that is why you find aspect of Islam there, the old, it looks like a Japanese, 𝙍𝙬𝙑 and so on, kind of ethnographic packs. But the next one, 𝙍𝙬𝙑𝙀, the Islamic scholar, vindicated according to my friend, the late Azra. 𝙍𝙬𝙑 vindicated us, Java and here, that after all, the veneer that 𝙍𝙬𝙑 was describing, there was something more than that. Not just ethnic or anything, no? Okay. Anyway, mga scholars lang yan makakaalam, ha? That is our secret. You come to us. All right. Do you know why I reserve also? Sabi ni Mahul, kasi tinanong siya sa UP, Din, bakit yung libro mo, maybe 80% Tausug, 10% Magindanao, 5% lang ang Maranao. Bakit hindi na-mention? Sabi niya kay Datu 𝙈𝙖𝙜𝙣𝙣, kasi very selfish yung Magindanao sa mga tarsila nila, hindi ipakita sa amin. Sinisikreto. Well, I found out, Joel, that the hagiography or the tarsila of the Sufi were built into the genealogy of the royal line itself. Unlike the Sufi in the other Islamic world, they really had the, the enumeration of the descent line of the Sufi. So we move out from there. The Buginis, Orang Mirantao, Seaborn, and then yung aristocrat mo, Commissioner Marumsalik wrote a book also on the Moro or aristocrats. So doon yun sa the Buginese times. Okay. So hindi nawala ang Maranao. All the pangampungs are also in that book. So you know. Okay, may I take some more time? Because this is important for scholarship. Bakit hindi na-publish yung PhD dissertation ni Mednick on the Maranao? Di ba kayo nagtatanong? Di kayo nagtataka? Why was the PhD dissertation of David Barajas not published. According to them, because they had findings that they could not share with the Maranaos, baka magalit yung ibang Maranaos. Now, I lay it in this book. I dare lay it because I was able to explain where the pangampong lines. And then there is a leftover question about a fifth pangampong, the baloy. And I also have an explanation about that. I will leave it to you so that you will have something to read. Hinto na tayo? Huh? Oh, last na daw. Gabihin tayo dito kaya babasahin ko pa yung paper ko. Magalit sa akin si the late Dr. Onopri Corpus. We served together at saka si Dr. Ocampo and sino pa yon sa Quezon, diyan sa National Historical Institute. Now, the grand narratives, the nationalist narratives, from grand narratives, yung Spanish narratives of history of Spain in the Philippines is about Hispanization. So who is the author of Hispanization of the Philippines? Pelan. Very good. I'll give you an A plus. So, what about 𝙍𝙪?
Spain in the Philippines.
So, why is that important? Because the Spaniards began to split, began to reconsider the thinking that far from converting the Moros, they should distinguish colonization from evangelization. So that's the beginning of the separation of the church and state idea. Thrown from Spain itself, because there was a trouble in Spain about that, and then reintroduced. So you see, I know about writing. Okay? So you see, colonization, Spanization. The doctrine of discovering, hindi ba, hiningi ng mga Indios sa Amerika, the Incas and so on, Pope, this Pope, pwede ba i-deny na natin yung doctrine of discovery? Who is the writer that first protested it in philosophy? Vittorio? Vittorio? Beginning with C, another one? Hindi ko na ituloy. Reserved for another lecture. Okay, now, nagbibiro lang ako. I make a very powerful statement in the book that the Moro people miss the critical age. The age, yung technical and critical age. So they have no 1800. They have no 18. In other words, wala silang bago lang yung encyclopedia, bago lang yung mga scientific. Because in the Catholic sense, dinidebate science versus faith. In Islam also, we were debating, why should we accept science when we are the beginners of science? Even Sud, even Farabi, and so on and so forth, medicine and all. So you can see that in Spain, they were familiar with it. But here, we were not so familiar with this new development. In other words, the epistemology break, na change na, nag-usher in na. Why are we missing that neo-modernity or post-modernity? Because very anthropological ang approach ng nationalist history. Now, again now we will have to deal with constellation of ideas, the emergence of phenomenon that we never saw before, especially in the navigation age of scientific techniques and in conjunctions with new trade routes in Europe. So that is why I say the Muslim rulers' generation of 1736 to 1775 missed out the 18th century great upheavals. I conclude here because this is already the writing of national history, and you know that the three trends, they are still debating in UP, si Guerrero and etc., constructivist, Constantino, the 1896, in quotation, syndrome for him. Sino? Teodoro, for him, no Philippine history unless it begins with 1896. I disagree, of course. I've shown it now. Unless we detach the Bangsamoro from the Philippines. So then, in the case of Corpus Onofre, he tried to put together that there are two streams of civilization, one for the Muslims and the other for the Christians. I hope that I have satisfied my lecture. Nakabayad na ako sa pag-print ng libro ko. Ma'am Karina, nakabayad na ba ako sa lecture na ito? Joel? Oh, thank you very much. Baka wala ng question and answer.
So again, thank you, Datu Mastura, for a lively, enriching, and an insightful lecture. No? Now let us listen to our book reviewer, joining us online via Zoom, Dr. Stephen Rood of the Social Weather Stations. Dr. Rood was a professor of political science at the University of the Philippines, Baguio, from 1981 to 1999. Philippine Country Representative for the Asia Foundation from 1999 to 2017, and since 2018 has been Fellow in Residence at the Social Weather Stations and Visiting Fellow at the Australian National University. From 2009 to 2013, he was a member of the International Contact Group for negotiations between the government and the MILF, and from 2013 to 2017, a member of the third-party monitoring team for the implementation of the agreements that had been reached. He is the author of the book, The Philippines, What Everyone Needs to Know, published by the Oxford University Press in 2019. So again, we'd like now to go now to Dr. Rood. So,
good afternoon. One hopes that the sound is good in this remote version. I would like to thank the Ateneo and Joel in particular for inviting me to give some remarks in review of this book, and for arranging for me to do it via a remote. When I told Lourdes Mastura a couple of weeks ago that I rarely leave the townhouse, she says, correct. You can't be too careful with COVID around. So I have a Mastura impritura for my virtual presence here. I'm going to resist the temptation to talk about what Michael just said, except to say two things. First, I wished I'd heard this before I tried to read the book. It is a very good way of approaching the book, and I encourage people to think hard about it as they buy the book and work their way through it. Secondly, I hasten to add that I am not an anthropologist. I'm a political scientist. People mistake me for one because of my long residence in Baguio, but I do not pretend to understand the details of anthropological theory. In any case, my remarks. I first met Dr. Datu Michael Mastura in 1987 when the Cordillera Studies Center at the University of the Philippines in Baguio held a conference on autonomy for the Cordillera. I've had the pleasure of interacting with him frequently over the years in many different circumstances. Several of the invited speakers in the 1987 conference were from Mindanao because the 1987 Constitution provides for autonomy for both Muslim Mindanao and the Cordillera. And at the time, Datu Mike was a member of Congress and had previously been a member of the Ministry of Muslim Affairs. The thinking, of course, behind the inviting of people to speak on the topic of Muslim Mindanao, it was to look for comparisons and contrasts between the two situations, the two potentially autonomous regions. And these comparisons and contrasts continue to intrigue me. Simply put, the question can be raised, why in 1989 the autonomous region in Muslim Mindanao was instituted and thereafter revised in 2001, and then subsequently in 2019 replaced by the Bangsamoro Autonomous Region in Muslim Mindanao, while throughout the decades since, autonomy was never achieved by the Cordillera. I venture to say that the short answer involves the sultanates, which in turn were based on Islam. A longer answer can, in fact, be found in this book, okay? And so it's worthwhile remembering that we have to delve deeply into the details in order to understand the dynamics of what has happened. This is an ambitious and wide-ranging book. Joel referred to the many layers of Michael's thinking, and you just got an illustration of it in his lecture. But its center is an explication of the two major elements of Mahul's constellation of sultanates, the Sultanate of Magindanao, downriver, sa Ilod, and the Rajanate of Buayan, upriver, Sarayan, in the Pulangi River Basin. Michael does admit the boundaries of the two major power centers were never clearly defined. One characterization I have read is that the boundary sort of was at the limit of the tidal surge of river water, so that upriver is freshwater entirely, whereas downriver had an admixture of salty water. As Mastura says, this book's core is derived from the core lineage of Datus, whose Muslim Sultanate capital lay on the Pulangi River, where they took pride in a pattern of indigenous political system. The use of tarsidas, or written genealogies, allows for the construction of the sequence of the Raja Buayans of Buayan, for example, which can be cross-referenced against the reigns of the Magindanao sultans, which helps to follow the historical relationship between these two systems of power. Aside from the male line, as Michael has mentioned in his lecture, frequent reference is made to how marriages caused or strengthened interrelated linkages among datus and royal houses. Sometimes the welter of names can be daunting, but there is an excellent index in the book. Congratulations to whoever did it. And of course, there's always the internet that you can refer to. One thread throughout the book is the role of Islam, both as the background from which statecraft emerged, and the motivating factor in its resilience in the face of colonialism. As one author had it, Islam was like a slow giant wave washing through the Malay archipelago. So it's not surprising that not only some of the leading lights of Magindanao history, such as Sharif 𝙍𝙬𝙐𝙐, but office titles such as Kapitan Laut, Navy Commander, come from those Malay archipelagos, in particular Ternate. Islam allowed for institutional structures that encompass the whole territorial domains and linguistic groups, and the courtly society inspired by the Islamic religion. As for the wholesale adoption of Islam, Mastura summarizes, within the Sunni aspect of Islam, the stratified structure of Magindanao society did not pose an obstacle to the conversion process. As it were, the reverence for the family of the Prophet and the Sharif descent lineage merely affected the realignment of the social power relations over the community of believers. This is a direct source of legitimacy as ulil amr, or rule to bind. Though the book is not a detailed history of the Boer Wars, and Datu Mike mentioned Mahul's stages and so on, it does deal with the hostilities between Moros and the Spanish state and church. Quote, the Catholic religion came to the Muslim South as an integral part of military expeditions and as of the colonial government. This participation of the church in Spanish penetration in Mindanao and Sulu was perfectly consistent with Catholic mission theory and was also a concomitant of the union of church and state in Catholic Spain. Moros made no distinction between the Spanish colonials and the Hispanized natives who were in the colonial administrative and military service. Just as a quick footnote, Michael did make reference today to the realization later in Spanish endeavor of the distinction between colonial and conversion. But in any case, one aspect of this interpenetration, of which I had been aware, was the establishment in the 1870s by Jesuits of what Mastura refers to as a Paraguayan-style reduction settlement, which involved a program of rescate, ransom, of Tiruray slaves and even Moro children from the slave markets of Mindanao to be raised as Christians. This was an effort to reduce the power of the Datus by striking at the heart of the institution of slavery, and Moro Datus were well aware of this. In his foreword to the book, Patricio Abinales states that with its publication, quote, there is no more reason for any Filipino or Moro scholar not to teach courses on Magindanao and Moro histories. I remember that 11 years ago, I had a teaching sabbatical in Washington, D.C., where I tried to construct material about the Philippines, but being very Mindanao-centric, since that's where my activity was mostly focused. Recent years have shown a growing literature, tracked every year by Carol Argelius in Mindanews, that would make that endeavor more possible, that Mindanao-centric perspective more possible. And I find Mastura's treatment of the 1896 revolution a good example of what I had wanted to do. So he has a brisk, standard 20, 25 pages review of the run-up to the revolution, and then considers how it was viewed from the Muslim South. Quote, the 19th century growth of liberalism up north was not without a counterpart to the development of a pan-Islamic movement. It was the return of pilgrims, hajis, from the Middle East who became acquainted with the state of affairs there that constituted the anti-colonial driving force in the southern Philippines. So, despite the coincidence of timing, there was no direct connection between the revolutionary struggle and most events in the Moro South. It is true that the revolutionaries did try to appeal for support to their cause, and Aguinaldo wrote to the Sultan of Sulu to try to persuade him. Unfortunately, he addressed this to Sultan Harun al-Rashid, who had abdicated 5 years before and was in southern Palawan. Now, this view from the Pulangi River Basin from Muslim Mindanao was itself in this book constructed from a particular viewpoint. Datu Michael Mastura is a Datu. He's not a subaltern. He cites Salibi, for instance, as concluding, quote, "The principal mistake of the Spanish policy was in part due to their failure to rule the Moros through their Datus and to give proper respect to native authority." Aspects such as debt bondage and real slavery, banyaga, are, for instance, are treated as facts of life in the system that Dr. Mike is explicating, not as a focus. There's a different book called The Embarrassment of Slavery, also published by Ateneo de Manila Press, for which this is a focus. But Mastura's book could serve as a solid foundation for a wide-ranging re-examination in dialogue with other works of the history of Muslim Mindanao and its relation with the Philippine nation state. The Aguinaldo letter to a sultan who had abdicated years before can serve as an example of how national elites are often quite ignorant of the realities in the southern Philippines. This ignorance can have truly untoward consequences. I remember a closed-door meeting in June 2000, where civil society, the business sector, and government leaders were brought together to try to discuss the impact and ways out of the all-out war being waged by the Estrada administration. There were 2 cabinet secretaries there, shall remain anonymous, and civil society, national civil society leaders, big business leaders, and so on, the kind of people who are willing to put in time for consultations and good governance. I remember being struck. I was sort of a fly on the wall since bilang isang banyaga, I'm not supposed to talk in those kinds of things. But I remember being struck at how little those people from the political center, the ones pulling the levers of national power, knew about what was going on in that all-out war, even though I myself considered myself terribly underinformed. But a particular incident happened in that meeting. Michael Mastura had an outburst. He said, this is as close to a quote as I can get, "If I hear one more time," this is how it gets, "if I hear one more time that the Philippines is the only Christian country in Asia, which sort of caught people's attention. In his message at the Cotabato City launch, Manong Bobby Alonto said, "There is an old African saying, unless the lion learns to write, all stories glorify the hunter." Writing Bangsamoro history from the perspective of the Moro is the lion writing his story not to earn glorification, but for truth. Dr. Michael Mastura is indeed a lion. His book is well worth the effort to read and understand as many of the layers as you can. And I'd like to thank, at the end, Carol Argelius of Mididus, who keeps cropping up. She's tireless and she certainly helped make sure this publication saw the light of day. Daghang salamat sa tanan.
Thank you, Rude. I was not very rude to you after all. Anyway, to say thank you also, I recognize my brother Datu Armando Mastura. He came late, but he said, I'm there to support you. He said, no, you go to Davao. It's nearer. You don't have to spend to come to Manila. And then my own niece also there, Sahida, was a mayor at the time in the municipality. So, Joel, how can I go anti-dynasty? That's why I have the party list, because I distinguish between the dynastic line that we have, the bloodline, just as the British distinguish with the royal dynasty and the other person. This is in answer to Steve's about, you know, the confusion in our system of thinking. And I wish that that would be erased. And that's my only concern.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Rude, and of course, Datu Mastura here. Due to the short time we have, we don't have an open forum. So, but we do have a book signing after, so you can actually approach the author here. He'll be signing the book itself, and then you can actually approach him if you have questions and comments regarding the public lecture as well. For online participants, you can actually email the author also for your questions and insights. Now we proceed to our last portion of the whole event itself. To formally close this event, we now call on Dr. Patricia Dacudao, the chair of the Department of History, for some closing remarks.
Thank you, everyone. Congratulations, Datu Michael Mastura, for the successful launch of your book, Surely Mindanao and Moro Studies, as well as Southeast Asian history, and most importantly, the diverse and cosmopolitan peoples of the region are enriched by your contribution to scholarship. A path-breaking work for the depth of its sources and the sophistication of its methodology, combining ethnography with politics, benefits us all as we continue to expand our knowledge and understanding of Mindanao, the Philippines, and Southeast Asia. Before we conclude, on behalf of our co-host, the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, we would like to thank Datu Mastura for the stimulating and thought-provoking lecture. Thank you too to Dr. Stephen Rood for a most wonderful review of the book, convincing us to purchase our own copy of Rulers of Magindanao. Thanks and acknowledgement also goes to Carol Argilas, not only for initially editing the book, but for also making this launch possible. Our thanks also goes to Karina Bolasco and her staff at the Ateneo de Manila University Press for further editing the book and for the live feed of the launch that we are live streaming right now. To Dean Bo Peep, Saloma Akpedanu, the Dean of the School of Social Sciences, we also offer our thanks for her constant support in all our endeavors. Our thanks also goes to our colleagues in the History Department, especially Mr. Alvin Cabral-Quinto, our gracious host, our moderator for this event. And thanks also to Joel and the Department of Sociology and Anthropology and to IDO for making the poster. and for spearheading and co-sponsoring this launch. Thank you, everyone, for being with us online and on-site. We hope you all enjoy this event, and don't forget to buy the book through Shopee and Lazada. And of course, for people here, we have the table outside for the book so that you can have the book signed. Um, yeah, the press has a table just before the door there. And that's all. Have a pleasant everyone. Have a pleasant afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dakudao. So we'd like to thank everyone for attending the today's event, the book launch and the lecture of Rulers of Magindanao in Modern History, 1515 to 1903. This event is brought to you by the Ateneo de Manila University School of Social Sciences, the Department of Sociology and Anthropology, the Department of History, the Anthropological and Sociological initiatives of the Ateneo or Asia, in collaboration with the Ateneo de Manila University Press. Again, just a reminder, the book is actually available here for sale at 15% off. No? So there's actually a discount for those who are attending. You can grab a copy of your book and have it signed here. For our participants as well, do join us for some refreshments there and for our book launch. So that's it for now. I am Alvin Cabalquinto, wishing you a pleasant day ahead. Good day.